I'll take each question here in turn. The question is what's next for the city, and also what's next for the intersection at 38th and Chicago. The intersection of 38th and Chicago indeed has multiple truths associated with it. As was being displayed for the last several hours, it is a critical and important location of racial justice and healing. It has been a very important location for which community can gather, both before as well as during this trial. And going forward on a permanent basis, we believe strongly that this should be both a permanent memorial to George Floyd, everything that he stood for in his life, but also a intersection where racial healing and justice is front and center in both the way the buildings and the infrastructure are set up, but also in the way that it allows for humanity to gather. Now, that is absolutely true. It's also true that this will and has been a very important transportation line planned for quite some time through our bus rapid transit system in the form of the D line. It is also true that neighbors surrounding that intersection have been subjected to far too much crime and violence over these last 7-8 months. The violence has been unacceptable. Everyone should have the ability to use their sidewalk, to have their kids play outside, free from, in a safe atmosphere. And so, moving forward, as the chief has mentioned, there will be a reopening of the intersection, but it is not a going back to normal. We're going to make sure that we have a bump out, a location for the memorial itself. We're going to make sure that we're doing everything possible to incentivize and encourage black ownership in that corridor itself through a combination of our commercial property development fund, which allows for patient capital so that our black community can own not just the businesses but some of the underlying real estate. As you know, we've also had some assistance that have gone out to several of the businesses that have been impacted over the last several months in the form of grants or forgivable loans. As for what's next for the city, transformation. Deep-seated change. Change in the way our police department operates, change in the way our economy functions to make sure that our black community is centered not just at the table but also as key beneficiaries of the work. And progress that needs to continue in the area of housing, which has always been a passion of mine. We could get into all of the specifics, and the specifics, believe me, are necessary right now. But we have a lot of change that will be coming down the pike.
Mr. Mayor,
yes.
Operation Safety Net, could you like to comment on how that went, and when might Minneapolis be opening up, pulling down some of the boarding downtown?
The question was about Operation Safety Net in general, and also with regard to some of the infrastructure that has been put up, some of the fencing around some of our key pieces of city infrastructure, notably City Hall, Hennepin County Government Center, some of our police precincts. I'll note that one of the big differences, there are many differences between last summer in late May and early June and right now. One of the biggest differences in terms of planning has been time. We've had time to prepare. Prepare in the way of establishing formalized agreements with our community members, and we have done so, making sure that we have 7 new contracts going out right now that are working at this moment with 7 different community organizations that are charged with both disseminating key information from the city as well as relaying us key intelligence as the nights and the days ahead progress. We've made sure to establish formalized agreements with neighborhood associations, block captains, neighborhood leaders, recognizing that there are moments when the best person to deliver the message doesn't necessarily work directly for the city and isn't necessarily myself. So making sure to empower those community voices has been a really critical component over these last several months. Indeed, there's also, through Operation Safety Net, been an increased presence in law enforcement, State Patrol, National Guard, and a number of our different mutual aid jurisdictions, including our police. And we are appreciative of the assistance, that has been provided throughout our city. And I fully recognize that to some there is a great level of discomfort due to the presence of law enforcement, and simultaneously, we need to keep our city safe. Both of those two things are true. As to the question of when will Operation Safety Net end, I imagine that it will be soon. I can't give you an exact number of days at this point, but I know we'll be in collaboration with a number of the different jurisdictions that are involved in Operation Safety Net itself. And I'll also note that Chief Arredondo, in fact, intended to be here, but the press conference itself got pushed back due to a number of different media reasons, and he's with the command staff as we speak.
Or how to change it?
The question from Ms. Navratil was, how does this verdict impact the question of change in this police department, or whether to
Replace it with the public safety department? Because some people want to get rid of MPD, some want to just change it. How does this verdict impact those conversations?
For my own purposes, speaking for myself, change has been long overdue regardless of the outcome of this verdict. Indeed, it's justice today, but we need to see justice tomorrow, and justice on Thursday, and justice on Friday, and continued. And we strongly believe that a big part of that is deep structural change in the way that our police department operates. And there are, of course, always differences of opinion as to what exactly that transformation, reform, whatever you want to call it, looks like. But, Chief Arredondo and I have issued a litany of changes to our policy, everything from overhauling our use of force policy to banning no-knock warrants in all but exigent circumstances, embedding a city attorney in the process to ensure that disciplinary practices are expedited as quickly as possible, and making sure that de-escalation is centered in everything we do, including the reporting structure itself. Now, those are just a few examples, and our office, along with council members with me here today, council members that are not here, have also worked very hard towards safety beyond policing, noting that not every instance needs a response from an officer with a gun. Whether that's social workers or mental health responders, we all believe that those are very important components of the work ahead. And we also need police. We need law enforcement. Both of those things are true. And so as for the work ahead, that's been my position all along. It'll continue to be my position right now going forward.
Mayor, of course.
So obviously we have this major verdict here in Minneapolis this week, but 2 days from now we also have another funeral in Minneapolis this very same week. So do you have any thoughts on these two pivotal things happening pretty much at once in our community?
Thank you. I believe it's Ms. Raditz.
Jokic.
Oh,
KSTT. That's okay.
Ms. Jokic's question was how these multiple different officer-involved killings have impacted the city and ultimately where we're going from here, given that the funeral of Dante Wright is coming very shortly. What happens in Brooklyn Center impacts Minneapolis. What happens in Minneapolis impacts Brooklyn Center, and we hope that what happens here in our state has a significant impact on the rest of the globe. I mean, the words that have been said, be they in churches, mosques, barbershops, or classrooms the world over, they've had an impact on so many people throughout our country, perhaps more than anyone could have expected. In so many instances, this has been a centuries-in-the-making reckoning around racial justice, and the incidents that happen, whether in Chicago or here, we should feel them quite acutely, and we know that they're especially felt and acutely by our communities of color. So the question is whether there is a curfew tonight. There is not presently a curfew that has been issued, although that certainly remains an option on the table if necessary. That is not the desired approach, but it is an option that will be available if need be.